a pilot fell. From burning A320 into dark ocean sky, and 200 people thought they would die. Fire filled the cockpit. No captain, no first officer, only smoke and screaming. Then the woman from last row said words nobody expected. "Call sign Angel, I am coming. She saved everyone." Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Flight 229 left Madrid for New York, with 218 passengers on board. The plane was a wide Airbus A320, half empty, quiet and calm. Most people were sleeping under thin blankets. The lights were low. Nobody on that plane knew that in less than 1 hour, only one woman could save them all.
In seat 42C, in the very last row, sat a tired woman named Grace Miller. She wore an old gray sweater over hospital scrubs. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She held a paper cup of cold coffee and stared out the window without really seeing anything.
She looked like nobody important. A flight attendant walking past thought she was just another tired nurse going home. Nobody guessed that 15 years ago, this same woman flew military planes into war zones with the call sign Angel. Grace was 44 years old. She had just finished a 14-hour surgery in a hospital in Madrid. She saved a young father's life that night, but she did not go home to rest. Instead, she rushed to the airport with her surgery clothes still on. Her sister Claire was sick in New York, and Grace was flying to see her after 8 long years without speaking. The two sisters had fought bitterly after their mother died. Claire blamed Grace for not being there. Grace never forgave herself either. Now Claire had cancer, and Grace was the only surgeon who could try to save her. She sat quietly in the last row, thinking about the sister who hated her, planning what she would say when she landed. Grace had not always been a surgeon. Long ago, she was a young pilot in the Air Force, flying big cargo planes into dangerous places where nobody else wanted to go. She flew medicine and food into war zones, landing on rough dirt strips while gunfire echoed nearby. She once landed her plane in a field surrounded by fighting soldiers just to deliver medicine to sick children. Her crew gave her the name Angel because she always seemed to appear when people needed hope the most. For years, she flew mission after mission, saving thousands of lives without ever seeking credit for it. Then one terrible day, a mission went wrong. The ground shook during an earthquake relief flight, and the runway cracked open beneath her landing plane. Fire spread fast. She survived, but several of her crew members did not.
She carried that guilt for years afterward, believing she had failed the people who trusted her.
She left the military soon after, went back to school, and became a surgeon instead, telling herself she would never again be responsible for lives inside a cockpit.
She buried the pilot inside her and became only the doctor, hiding a part of herself that she believed had caused too much pain.
2 hours into the flight, a loud bang shook the plane. Passengers woke up in fear. The lights flickered on and off. A strange smell of burning wires spread through the cabin. Smoke began pouring out from the front of the plane. People started coughing and covering their mouths. Something was very wrong. The captain's voice came over the speaker, but it did not sound calm. It shook with fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a serious fire in the cockpit. We cannot control it. I am so sorry." The speaker went silent. Seconds later, passengers on one side screamed and pointed out the window. A man in a flight suit was falling through the dark sky, a white parachute opening behind him. The pilot fell from burning A320 into the empty night, leaving everyone behind. Moments later, another shape fell from the front of the plane.
The co-pilot had also jumped. Both pilots were gone. The plane was now flying itself, burning, with nobody at the controls. The cabin exploded into chaos. Children cried. Parents held their families close and said quiet goodbyes.
A young flight attendant named Mia ran through the aisle, shouting for anyone who could fly a plane. "Please, is there a pilot on this flight?" she called out. "Anyone with flying experience? We need help now." A businessman said he had a flight game on his phone. An old man said he flew fighter jets 60 years ago. but his hands shook too much now. Nobody could help. Smoke grew thicker. The fire in the cockpit glowed orange through the broken door. Then, from the very back of the plane, a quiet voice spoke. The woman from last row said the words nobody expected. "I can fly this plane," she said. Mia turned around in shock. The tired woman in scrubs was standing now, her eyes calm and steady, completely different from a minute ago. "Who are you?" Mia asked. The woman answered simply, "My name is Grace Miller. I flew cargo planes in the Air Force for 16 years. Call sign Angel. I know how to fly, and right now, I am the only chance this plane has." Without waiting for permission, she walked straight toward the burning cockpit like she had done this before. Grace stepped through the smoke and heat into the cockpit. The windshield was completely gone, blown out when the pilots ejected. Wind screamed through the opening at 300 miles an hour. Papers and dust flew everywhere. Flames still burned along broken wires and melted plastic near the control panel. Grace grabbed a small fire extinguisher and sprayed the worst flames, buying herself time. She pulled on an oxygen mask and dropped into the pilot's seat, her burned fingers already touching the controls. She scanned what instruments still worked. Altitude was falling slowly. Speed was steady. Fuel would last almost 2 hours. The nearest airport was too far to reach safely before the fire spread further. There was only one real choice left: to land the plane on the ocean below, in complete darkness, during a storm, using a plane she had never flown before in her life.
She grabbed the radio with shaking, burned hands.
"Mayday, Mayday," she called. "This is Flight 229. Both pilots have ejected. I am a passenger and former military pilot taking control. I need help guiding an emergency landing on water." The air traffic controller's voice came back full of shock. "Did you say both pilots are gone? Who is flying the plane right now?" Grace answered without fear. "I am. Call sign Angel. Get every rescue ship and aircraft you can to my position. I am bringing this plane down." The controller paused, then said, "Copy that, Angel. Help is coming. Fly safe." Back in the cabin, Mia picked up the intercom and spoke to calm the terrified passengers. "We have a pilot," she announced. "A former military flyer. She is taking control now. Please put on your life vests and follow every instruction." Fear did not disappear, but hope returned to some faces. People held hands. Mothers whispered comfort to their children. Somewhere in the chaos, a small light of belief began to grow. Inside the cockpit, fire kept returning no matter how many times Grace beat it down with wet cloths. Her hands blistered from the heat, but she did not stop flying. The autopilot could not be trusted anymore, so she took full manual control, feeling the plane shake and pull under her hands. Military jets soon appeared beside the wings, flying close to guide her down.
A voice crackled through the radio. "Flight 229, this is Navy 211. We have your position. We are here to help you land." Grace felt a small wave of relief. She was not alone anymore.
As the plane came down through the clouds, the ocean below looked wild and rough, with waves rising 30 feet high. Grace remembered her old training from years ago, back when this all seemed like just theory in a classroom. Flaps down halfway, landing gear kept up so it would not catch the water and flip the plane over. Nose slightly raised for the final approach. She spoke calmly into the intercom one last time before landing.
"Everyone, brace now,"
she said.
"Heads down, arms covering your heads. We are landing in the water. Stay strong. We will make it."
The plane hit the ocean surface with a violent shake that threw everyone forward against their seatbelts. Metal groaned and screeched. The plane bounced once, twice, then finally settled onto the water, floating just enough for people to escape. Water rushed into the broken cockpit, freezing cold, rising fast around Grace's legs. She tried to move but found her leg trapped under broken metal. Mia rushed in through the flooding cabin and pulled with all her strength until the metal shifted and Grace's leg came free. Together, the two women pushed through the rising water and reached the emergency exit, where passengers were already sliding into life rafts under the dark sky. In the final seconds before landing, Grace thought briefly of her old crew from years ago, the ones she could not save. She whispered quietly to herself that this time would be different. that she would bring everyone home safely, no matter what it cost her. The plane skimmed the top of a wave, bounced hard, then slammed down fully into the dark water with a force that rattled every bone in her body. For a moment, everything went black and silent, and she was not sure if she was still alive. Rescue helicopters arrived within the hour, their lights sweeping across the black water. Coast Guard ships pulled survivor after survivor from the cold ocean. When the final count came in, everyone held their breath for the answer. All 218 passengers were alive. All crew members were alive.
Grace, exhausted and burned, had saved everyone on that plane, using skills she thought she buried years ago.
Grace woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed, her hands wrapped in thick bandages, her body aching everywhere. A doctor told her the incredible truth. Every single person from Flight 229 had survived because of her. Passengers began visiting her room one after another. A young mother thanked her with tears in her eyes, holding her sleeping baby close. An elderly couple, married for 50 years, told her she had given them more time together. A teenage girl said she wanted to become a pilot now, inspired by what Grace had done that night. Then came the visit Grace feared the most. Her sister Claire walked into the hospital room slowly, thin from illness, eyes filled with tears. She had watched the news and seen videos passengers recorded during the flight. "I was wrong about you," Claire whispered, holding Grace's bandaged hand gently. "I blamed you for not being there when Mom died, but I understand now. You are always trying to save someone. That is simply who you are." The two sisters cried together, finally healing wounds that had lasted 8 long years. News of the rescue spread around the world within days. People called Grace a hero, though she never accepted the title easily. Airlines offered her large sums of money for interviews and safety campaigns. Reporters waited outside her hospital for a comment. Grace refused most requests, wanting only quiet and time to heal. Her burned hands took months to recover, and doctors were unsure if she could ever perform delicate surgery again with the same precision. It was a painful cost for saving so many lives, but Grace never once said she regretted her choice. Investigators later found that faulty wiring in an old electrical panel had caused the fire, a problem that had been scheduled for repair, but never finished in time. The 2 pilots who ejected were cleared of any blame, since staying inside the burning cockpit for even 1 more minute would have meant certain death for everyone. Grace met both pilots later and told them gently that they had not failed anyone. They had simply given someone else the chance to finish what they could not. Months later, Grace performed her sister's cancer surgery herself, her damaged hands slower now but still steady enough to save the person she loved most. The surgery succeeded, and Claire's cancer went into remission. The 2 sisters grew closer than ever before, spending holidays together, laughing about old memories, healing what once felt permanently broken. A year after the crash, survivors from Flight 229 organized a reunion dinner in New York. Nearly everyone attended, bringing their families, their new babies, their second chances at life. One by one, people stood up and shared how surviving that night had changed everything for them. A young woman announced she was studying to become a pilot. A father said he had finally reconciled with his own estranged brother, inspired by Grace's story with her sister. Grace sat quietly through it all, uncomfortable with the attention, but deeply moved by what she had given these strangers without ever planning to. Near the end of the night, an old man walked over to her table and thanked her for something she did not expect. He said that before the crash, he had been planning to give up on life after losing his wife the year before. Watching Grace fight for every single passenger that night, refusing to let anyone die, had reminded him that people were still worth fighting for. He said he had called his children the very next morning, for the first time in years. Grace eventually returned to flying in a smaller way, joining a medical relief group that flew doctors and supplies into disaster areas around the world. She combined both parts of herself now, the pilot and the surgeon, into one single purpose. She often told young students who asked about that night the same simple answer. "I did not think about myself," she would say. "I only thought about the people who needed help. That is what made it possible." On her very first mission with the relief group, she flew into a small country hit hard by flooding, carrying doctors and medicine to villages that had lost everything. As the plane touched down on a wet, narrow airstrip, she felt something she had not felt in years, a quiet sense of peace. She was no longer running from the pilot she used to be. She was finally letting both halves of herself work together, the woman who could fly through fire and the woman who could heal with her hands.
The guilt she carried for years about her old crew did not disappear completely, but it grew lighter with every life she helped save afterward.
Mia, the young flight attendant who had pulled Grace free from the flooded cockpit, stayed close friends with her long after that night. The two women often spoke on the phone, checking in on each other, laughing about how strange it was that a stranger from the last row had changed both their lives forever. Mia eventually left her job as a flight attendant and began training to become a pilot herself, saying that watching Grace fly that night had shown her what real courage looked like. The story of Flight 229 spread far beyond the passengers who lived through it. Schools invited Grace to speak to students about courage and calm thinking under pressure. She always gave the same message, telling young people that heroes rarely look the way movies show them. Sometimes, the bravest person in the room is the quiet one nobody notices, sitting alone in the last row, carrying more strength than anyone could guess just by looking at her. Years later, when people asked Grace Miller why she walked toward a burning cockpit instead of staying safely in her seat that night, she always gave the same quiet answer. Some people are simply built to run toward danger when others need saving, no matter what it costs them. That is not something a person chooses. It is simply who they are, and once a person understands that about themselves, they can never truly walk away from it again. The passengers of Flight 229 never forgot the tired woman from the last row who stood up when nobody else could. They never forgot the 6 words she said before walking into the fire. Call sign angel, I am coming. Because sometimes, the person who saves everyone is not wearing a uniform, is not sitting in the front, and is not expecting anyone to notice her at all. Sometimes, she is simply the quiet woman in the last row, waiting for the moment the world needs her most.